Fans have been dreaming of a new Paul Simon album, and as it turns out, so is he. My review of 7 Psalms is coming up next on Track by Track. Hey everybody, my name's Kyle, and this is Track by Track, music reviews, news, and commentary. Thanks for tuning in today, and if this is your first time here, please take a second to click subscribe so you won't miss future reviews and more. The last time Paul Simon went into the studio seemed like it could very well be the last time Paul Simon went into the studio. That was 2018, and the recording of his album In the Blue Light, a collection of reworked and mostly lesser-known songs from his legendary catalog. At that time, Simon claimed he was done with songwriting, which would have meant his final collection of original music was 2016's Stranger to Stranger. Mind you, that was a really good album, so I suppose it could be said that he was going out on a high note. Still, even when I reviewed his Blue Light album here 5 years ago, I expressed that I'd gladly welcome him back if he rediscovered his creative muse. It took a few years, and perhaps a pandemic, for Paul to find his spark reignited for his latest, we shall not say last, album of new music. And in returning to the studio, it seems entirely fitting that the occasion would be to create one of the most unique records of his career. 7 Psalms came to Paul Simon in dreams, inspirations that would wake him in the night. As the title suggests, this music comes from a spiritual place, sometimes hymn-like, and often sung almost as if in prayer. And although the title suggests there are 7 psalms, it's a little more complicated than that. There's actually 9 sections of music here, as we have 6, shall we say, movements, as well as a 7th piece that opens the album and is reprised twice more. Now, if you haven't noticed, I avoided using the word songs describing the music. Simon has made it clear he doesn't think of the album in that context and in fact prefers that the album be consumed as a single, uninterrupted piece. To that end, he's released 7 Psalms as a single 33-minute opus rather than as separate tracks. I can respect that, and it's certainly not the first time a major artist has done it. Prince had the same philosophy with his 1988 Lovesexy album, which was also released as a single piece of continuous music rather than 9 separate tracks. Bet you didn't think that cover would show up in a Paul Simon video. For the most part, I think this approach works, aided in no small part by the relative brevity of the album. Again, at only 33 minutes, it's pretty easy to consume in a single sitting, just as Simon intended. Still, there's clearly pieces here that one would categorically call songs, and indeed every passage is individually titled in spite of being embedded within a single track. My professional opinion is a folksy, very Bob Dylan-esque ditty that arrives around the middle of the album. It's a fun, lighthearted passage that stands well on its own, certainly one of the highlights to me if we're to do any singling out. Later in the album we get the Sacred Harp, which finds Simon in perhaps his most traditional mode of singer-songwriter and, most importantly, storyteller. These are some of the most evocative, cinematic, character-driven lyrics on the album. Trademark Paul Simon. But I have to say the inclusion of Edie Brickell's vocals on this track really takes me out of the moment. Up until she arrives, there's a powerful intimacy at work, and it feels like a misstep to make such a detour. One other segment I'll single out is Trail of Volcanoes, easily the most up-tempo passage on the album. Up-tempo is perhaps an overstatement, I suppose. It's mid-tempo at best. Still, there's a percussiveness here that calls to mind some of Peter Gabriel's more cinematic moments, songs like San Jacinto or his score from The Last Temptation of Christ. It's actually one of the most compelling moments on the album to me, and it's over all too soon. I really would have enjoyed hearing Simon expand on the sounds he only briefly explores here. But in terms of 7 Psalms working as a single cohesive listening experience, I think it succeeds more often than not. As I mentioned earlier, one of the Psalms acts as a recurring theme that helps tie things together. The Lord, Part 1, opens the album. It's not actually called Part 1, but since it turns up twice more, I'll refer to it that way for the sake of clarity. In any case, Simon establishes the spiritual theme of the album here at the outset, that the Lord is in fact in everything. Sometimes these declarations feel more like a stream of consciousness than inspired songcraft. Simon sings, "The Lord is a virgin forest," and then, "The Lord is a forest ranger." feels more like word association than inspiration, and if you're of a certain generation, you may envision other things when you hear him sing of the Forest Ranger. Still, I appreciate how these themes evolve during each reprise. On The Lord Part 2, things take a darker turn with stanzas like "COVID virus is the Lord." Then on Part 3, the final reprise, Simon even sings "The Lord is my record producer," which makes me wonder if the Lord is eligible for a Grammy nomination. Musically, The Lord Parts 1 through 3 anchors itself around the strongest melodic hook on the album. That's a wise choice, since it's a theme that essentially provides forward momentum and continuity. Still, I wish it felt more melodically original. The riff instantly reminded me of the acoustic opening of Magic Man by Heart. Once you hear that, it's hard to let it go, and you will hear it a lot. Rounding out the Psalms are a collection of passages that arguably work best within the context of the album as a whole. That is to say, I don't think many of them would stand up well as individual songs. "Love is like a braid" has some nice lyrical phrasing, but it's ultimately too freeform to stand on its own. "Your Forgiveness" is a low point for me, arriving in the middle of the psalm cycle with its meandering lyrics and musical ideas that make the arrival of Trail of Volcanoes following it all the more refreshing. The album closes with Weight, a moving meditation on mortality with lyrics that feel highly personal. It's one of the more individually cohesive pieces on the album, to be sure, but once again, the appearance of Edie Brickell feels more like a distraction than a highlight. As much as I can appreciate Simon including his wife on such a personal song, I can't help but feel like it would be a more powerful song with his voice alone. All that being said, closing the album with an amen feels entirely apropos. Overall, Simon seems to be in strong form here, considering what it is that he's set out to create. He sounds as good vocally as anything he's done in the past decade or two. I'll also say his guitar playing is first rate as well. The production brings such a deep, rich sound to it, reinforcing the wise choice to make this record an acoustic affair. And while at first I wondered if some of the other instrumentation added in was superfluous, the deeper I listened, the more I appreciated the subtle textures they provided. As a dream-inspired project, this album is certainly unlike any other in Simon's catalog. Sometimes different is better, and other times different is just different. This album feels closer to the latter than the former, but I'm generally okay with that. At this point, I'd rather see this iconic songwriter following his muse than rehashing the past in the name of musical fan service. His 2023 effort may not stand shoulder to shoulder with his best work, but neither does it tarnish any of it. So I'm giving 7 Psalms by Paul Simon an X rating of 6 out of 10. It's a more than respectable return by a music legend still following his dreams. Once again, my name's Kyle, and this has been Track by Track. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Plus, check out some of these other videos below that I think you might also enjoy. And of course, be sure to click subscribe, because true music fans always want new releases the day they come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.